Well, keeping with our end of the year theme of giving the people what they want, it's our one of our most requested boys of the past year, and we're so happy he's back. He's a raconteur of some renown and a comedian and a radio host, and I think you're gonna like him, ladies and gentlemen. It's Brody.
That's the first time that one of our most requested boys has ever been in my intro. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight's story is called "The South Will Rise Again, Tryptophan Notwithstanding." And before I get to the story, I have to confess that I may be a little bit hypersensitive. I once went to dinner at Jane and Gary's house, and I went to use the restroom, and Jane brought me a little guest towel that said Jew on it in big letters, and I was hurt and offended and troubled by this, until my wife, who is much smarter than I am, said, "They all say that. Jane Edith Wilson has monogrammed towels." To be completely fair, I have to confess that I made that up. It's not true. I emailed it to Jane to find out if she minded me opening with it. And she sent back an email assuring me that it was very funny, telling me that her mother used to ask her not to write her initials on things because it was freaking people out. And that she does, in fact, have special towels for Jews. Just one of the many reasons that I have a pathetic, middle-aged married guy crush on Jane Edith Wilson. Tonight's story is called "The South Will Rise Again, Tryptophan Notwithstanding." I try to be a good man. So, despite the extent to which I disliked the idea, a few years ago, my wife and I went to Georgia to spend Thanksgiving with her family. We chose Thanksgiving because I'm Jewish and her family, her father is a Southern Baptist minister who 2 weeks before our wedding sent my lovely bride a letter urging her not to marry me, as we would not be on equal footing and could not spend eternity together. As if "till death do us part" was not intimidating enough a span of time. So it seemed to me that I didn't want to be there, on Christmas. Christ and more Christ, lots of Christ. You killed him, right? Yeah, get involved in that. And on that year, Thanksgiving didn't correspond with Hanukkah, so we didn't have to deal with the menorah, and it was going to be easier for me, Thanksgiving. So we flew to see her family where they live just outside of Lafayette, Georgia. And I will parenthetically say that it is pronounced Lafayette. I know this because I was mocked mercilessly for pronouncing it Lafayette, as it is spelled. Apparently it is to be pronounced Lafayette, 2 syllables, and then a third implied syllable that comes from a question mark. Lafayette. We went to my sister-in-law's house where our niece greeted us in a t-shirt that had a big Confederate flag on it. Over the words, "It's a Southern thing," spelled with an A. "Y'all wouldn't understand." And I really wanted to say, I understand bigotry. It's not so much mitigated by geography. But I didn't say that, and I was kind of angry with myself for not saying that. I could tell it was going to be a difficult visit at the Thanksgiving dinner table when nobody laughed at my Thanksgiving joke. But it was my turn to say what I was thankful for. I said that I was thankful that at that very first Thanksgiving, everybody ignored the one wise old Native American woman who kept saying, "Don't feed them. If you feed them, they'll never leave." My in-laws stared at me with contempt and suspicion, and perhaps considered the possibility that they shouldn't feed me. We had Thanksgiving dinner, we got through it, and the following day, my father-in-law suggested that, in order to have a really good, entertaining time, we should go into the city, by which he meant Chickamauga, to visit the swap meet. So we did. And at the swap meet, big hangar-sized building divided up into small booths, the first stop had to be the Confederate flag t-shirts booth, where my sister-in-law was going to buy some of them Confederate flag t-shirts that her daughter likes so much. And I went into the booth and they hang them on display. The coon dogs with the big brown eyes airbrushed into the back of pickup trucks. And there was one with, I kept wondering, do they not know that this is a symbol of racism to much of the world? And there was a beautiful Confederate flag t-shirt over the slogan, "It's not hate, it's heritage." And I thought, oh yeah, they know. I started imagining one with a new sonnet that said, "Hang loose, brother, it's just tradition." And while my sister-in-law is picking out the appropriate racist t-shirts for her daughter, I turned around and came across a brightly colored tabletop display of embroidered patches that you can sew onto your jackets and backpacks. It was, Confederate flags and SS symbols and white Aryan Nation logos, and there's the KKK patch right there. And a little dumpy bald man came and stood next to me and picked out a fine swastika, a traditional black on a red circle, and held it up to his chest, and then up to his arm, and then up to his chest again, and then looked to me for an opinion. Like now we're playing Jew-Eye for the hate guy. I found myself frantically scanning the tabletop for a yellow Star of David that I could pick up to play along. Not finding one, I smiled half-heartedly and nodded non-committally and backed out of the booth. My wife, who is much smarter than I am, suggested that my response to him should have been, as a Jew, I'd go with the sleeve. I didn't have that kind of presence of mind. I just backed out of the booth and spent the rest of the day at the swap meet, irrationally afraid that my circumcision was showing. The following day, we were to come home. We drove back to the airport, I got on the plane, and the moment I was in my seat on the plane, I felt myself relax. My breath opened up again, I returned to myself, I became a more rational human. And it occurred to me that my niece probably isn't a racist. She was a rebellious teenager who was flying what she had grown up with as the rebel flag. Truth is, it was entirely mitigated by geography. And my sister-in-law probably doesn't support racism. She's trying to be a good mom and allow her daughter to wear the clothes she wants to wear, whether she approves of them or not. And my father-in-law wasn't taking me to the swap meet because he's a crazy hick. He was taking me to the swap meet because he knows I collect swords and there's a guy at the swap meet who sells swords and he thought that would be a nice gesture for his son-in-law. He was just trying to be a good man. And I felt my heart open up a little bit and I realized they're not just my in-laws, they actually are part of my family now. And then there's that little guy with the swastika. And I couldn't let go of that. I still can't let that be okay. I find Nazis completely intolerable. And as I sat there on the plane thinking that, I realized the real horror of it all is that I'm a bigot. I'm Dylan Brody. Thank you very much.
Our favorite meeting, Dylan Brody.